This series contains adult language and descriptions of graphic violence. Listener discretion is advised.
Okay, hi guys. Margot here, and this is Death by Southwest, and unfortunately, Jenna is not here, and I'm not even gonna try and get into why, because I know that I feel like there's always an excuse as to why the episode's late, why Jenna's not here, something like that. Basically scheduling. There was scheduling issues. Jenna did kind of did me a favor. I didn't have to. I was invited to go up to Phoenix Sunday night to meet my boss. I produce comedian Jim Brewer's podcast, and I've been doing that for about 6 months. Never met him in person, so he had to show up there and was kind enough to invite me. And Jenna came with me, so I didn't have to go alone. And between that and just other things, we just couldn't seem to connect this weekend to get this recorded. So here I am on Tuesday at 5:00, trying desperately to get this out to you guys.
Hey there, Ryan Reynolds here. It's a new year, and you know what that means. No, not the diet. Resolutions. A way for us all to try and do a little bit better than we did last year. And my resolution, unlike big wireless, is to not be a raging and raise the price of wireless on you every chance I get. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited. See mintmobile.com for details.
Yeah, so that's where we're at. And I was going to kind of talk about going up to Phoenix and seeing Jim's show and meeting him. However, I've actually kind of stopped looking at the reviews. We don't get that many anymore, but I happened to look at one the other day, and it caused me to think, well, maybe I'm not going to talk about it. And, I know I've said before, reviews help the podcast, period. It just helps the podcast be more kind of discoverable. And personally, the feedback to me is extremely helpful. So good, bad, or indifferent, I just think it's always good to get feedback on what you're doing. But that being said, I think we've talked about that. We try not to take it like too seriously, too much to heart, at least the bad stuff. The good stuff, I'm like taking it right to heart. So I saw two actually, one from Sunday that said, please get to the show. Way too much information, not relevant to the show. That's from BEI. That's fair. And then from Ms. Zadie, yep. I really like the podcast, but she talks so much about herself that I feel like I didn't get enough about the crime, and her rambling can seem a little self-centered, which I think I've mentioned before, that talking about myself, talking about updates on my life, doing an episode about Izzy, about Mark, about Greece, things like that it does make me feel it feels a little self-indulgent. Like, who really gives a fuck about me? You're here for the true crime. Of course, I've gotten feedback from other people that's like, no, we love, you're a good storyteller. We like hearing about your life. And I'm sure that that's the case, that there are people who like it and people who are like, who the hell is this chick and why the fuck do we care what she's saying? Which is fair. So I'm going to skip all of it today. And I know we didn't have a bonus yesterday. I know that we are just super inconsistent lately, and that must be super annoying for people who actually like the podcast and want to hear it. And I do apologize for that. And I'm going to stop, I feel like in the past I've been like, I'm going to do better, and I promise it's going to be like this. I'm going to stop making promises, because I'm doing the best that I can at this point. This is not really a job. It's more of a hobby, and I enjoy doing it. But the work that pays me has to come first. And so sometimes this suffers because of it, and that sucks, and I'm sorry. And I'm not going to apologize anymore because I get a lot of messages from people like, you apologize too much. So we're just going to jump right into the story today. And I guess, if someone is dying to hear a personal story about mine and Jenna's trip up to Phoenix and meeting Jim and all of that, let me know and maybe I'll record a little extra something. But for the many listeners who are just here for the true crime, we are going to get right into that. And I am once again recording on video, which I hate. But if I ever find the time to make social media clips, it's a lot easier to do when you have a video. So, and the video episodes will always, the full thing goes on YouTube. Nope, the full thing goes on Patreon. The first 15 minutes usually goes on YouTube. And last week I tried to do something new. I tried to add like pictures. Like when I was talking about the victim, I added a picture. When I was talking about the blue pickup truck or things like that. So I'm going to try to keep doing that. I don't know if people like it or not, but let me know. So I'm going to put my video behind all of this stuff so I'm not distracted by trying to not have a double chin in this video. Okay. So today we are headed to Phoenix, Arizona, where two 27-year-old best friends and roommates were living their best lives. That is, until one winter day in 2010, someone entered their suburban Phoenix home and committed an unthinkable crime that has left their families and the authorities puzzled for years. And did I already say that we're not going to do a sense of place? Maybe not. We're not going to do a sense of place today because this story takes place in Phoenix. Last week, this story took place in Glendale, I think, which is Phoenix. And we've had a handful of other stories that are in Glendale, Mesa, Tempe, Scottsdale. I actually don't think we've had one in Scottsdale, but all those places. So it feels redundant to do a sense of place for Phoenix, which I knew at some point that would happen, with a limited kind of locations, just Southwest locations. At some point, we're going to have covered most of them. So we're going to skip the sense of place. If you are dying to know more about Phoenix, there are past episodes where you can go listen to the sense of place, but I'm guessing no one's dying to know more about Phoenix. As I said last week, I'm not a huge fan of Phoenix. It feels like a giant parking lot in the middle of the desert. And when I actually noticed when me and Jenna were up there, because we were driving, we went to like Trader Joe's before we went to our hotel and stuff. And I was like, it's not that ugly. There are parts of Phoenix that are really lovely. And we were kind of right on ASU campus. I was like, it's not as ugly as I kind of always picture it in my mind. I picture it just literally as like highways in the middle of the desert, just brown. And it's not. The area where we were was actually like kind of nice looking. Trees and not a ton of trees. Also, I spent 10 years in Georgia. So 10 years in Georgia, which is like the most green, lush place I've ever lived. And then coming back here, it was a big difference. So I use the word green and trees lightly, but there are parts of Phoenix where there's like no trees. No, it is just brown. So this part of, we were actually in Tempe. It wasn't so bad. And I was like, maybe it's not so bad. Phoenix isn't as kind of ugly as I make it out to be in my mind. I was like, but something's just different about it than Tucson. And there's many, many things that are different about it than Tucson that I won't get into. But one of them that I had never really noticed until this moment was you can't see any mountains. So in Tucson, you can be almost anywhere in Tucson and see mountains. Some mountains, if not multiple mountain ranges. In Phoenix, it just looks flat, like there's no mountains. And that makes a huge difference in the attractiveness of the landscape, I guess. For those of you who are watching on video on Patreon, because this video will go on Patreon, I'm standing up. So usually I do this sitting down at my desk in the office. I'm standing up in the kitchen. I have this like stand-up desk. It's not a stand-up desk. I have this, it looks like a giant TV tray basically that I put on top of the kitchen table. It allows me to stand up while I work, which I really like. So I thought I would do it for this. Okay. So today we are going to talk about Nicole Glass and Melissa Mason. And Melissa, her nickname was BB, and that's how I'm going to refer to her because there's actually another Melissa that will enter into this story pretty quickly here. So as to make sure that it doesn't get confused, it's going to be Nicole and BB. So Nicole and BB were both 27 years old. They were both bartenders at a strip club, I believe. I know that BB worked at a place called Sweet Spot in the past. I'm not sure if that's where they met or not. But they had been roommates for 5 or 6 years and were both working at the same strip club at the time of our story in 2010. They lived together in a single-story brick home in Phoenix, just south of 42nd Street and Thomas Road. I saw two different things. I saw that Nicole owned the house and she bought it in 2006. I saw that BB owned the house and she bought it in 2006. Kind of irrelevant to the story. So one of them owned the home though. So Nicole was born in Los Angeles, but her family moved to Arizona when she was in the 6th grade. She was the oldest of 2 kids, and her sister Jessica were 5 years apart. Nicole's mom, Rachel, said they were very close to the point of driving her crazy, but they also would fight like crazy. Nicole's mom, Rachel, said she was a handful, a really upbeat person, a huge personality. She was a horseback rider. They owned horses here in Arizona, and so she learned to ride and loved it. She was also a prankster. She loved to play tricks on people. And at the time of this story, she was a junior at the University of Phoenix pursuing a degree in communications. BB was born and raised in Tucson. She was the oldest of 4 girls. And most of her family still lived in Tucson at the time of this story, including her younger sister, Samantha. She was younger by 7 years. And Samantha and BB were the closest out of the 4 sisters. Samantha said, quote, she was very goofy, loyal, sometimes a bit of an airhead. I always said she reminded me of Reese Witherspoon's character in Legally Blonde because she's very book smart, but also a little ditzy. Samantha also said that her sister was the one person she always wanted to be around. Just her aura and her presence would make you feel at ease. So, very little backstory on the girls, but that's what we have. And we are going to now move to December 3rd, 2010. It's about 7:30 in the morning, and Melissa Massey calls her friend Nicole to try and see if she wants to hang out later in the day, but the call went right to voicemail. This really surprised Melissa because they talked multiple times a day, every single day on the phone. They were very close, and Nicole's phone was never off. But Melissa thought, well, it's still pretty early, so, not that weird. Maybe she's asleep. Maybe her phone died and she's still asleep. So Melissa decided she would go to the gym and then give Nicole a call after. She did that. Called Nicole again, right to voicemail. So Melissa decided to try Nicole's roommate, BB. Her phone went right to voicemail. She wasn't concerned, but she was just like, it's just weird. I'm just going to go by their house. And she did. So she pulled up to their house. Both cars were in the driveway. Both Nicole and BB's cars were in the driveway. And Melissa actually had a key to the house. That's how close they were. So she knocked. They didn't answer. She thought maybe they're still asleep. Who knows? So she tried to open the door, but she couldn't get in because the lower lock on the door must have been locked. So, and this was really confusing for me. I know it seems like a small detail, but it's pertinent. And I could understand if it was like the chain was locked, but I was like, the lower lock. And then I realized that my house has something similar. So my back door, it has a deadbolt lock on the actual door. And then it has, like one of those turny little knobbin things on the door knob. And from the outside in the back, there is a key that fits into the doorknob, so you can turn the doorknob, but there's no outside lock to open up that top lock, that top padlock. So it's essentially does the same thing as like having a chain on your door, but it's like a deadbolt. And so from the inside, I can lock that. And like Jenna has a key if she wanted to get in. If that's locked, she can't get in because there's no way to unlock that from the outside. I definitely over-explained that, but I was having trouble picturing it. So this was weird though. So she unlocked the door, but the deadbolt, whatever, was locked. And so they apparently never did this. So she was like, something is off. Both their phones are going right to voicemail and I can't get in the house. And they have the lock locked that's never locked. So she was like, okay, this is weird. So she decided to walk around the back to see if the back door was open. And when she's in the back looking through the back door, she looked in, through a nearby window and noticed that someone was laying on the floor. She couldn't see the full body. She just could see someone's arm sticking out from like her vantage point laying on the floor. And she was like, oh, something is wrong. So she called the police immediately. Police arrived quickly on the scene. They couldn't get the door unlocked, so they actually had to kick in one of the windows to get into the house. They found They found BB first. She was face down in the dining room, her shirt pulled up from the back towards her head, and there was a little bit of blood that was starting to pool on the floor beneath her. And as they continued walking through the house, they next found Nicole. She was in the adjoining family room, also lying face down. Both women were pronounced dead on the scene. Police officers cleared the home, made sure that there was no one else in the home, and then they roped off the house and submitted for a search warrant to kind of further investigate. Now, what's weird is that this was noonish, I believe, and they did not get the warrant to go back into the house. They were able to go into the house to determine that whether the women were dead or alive or what was going on, but then they couldn't do more than that at that time without a warrant. So they left. They didn't get a warrant until 10 p.m. that night. That's 10 hours, which I had no idea. I actually don't think myself and Jenna have talked about this much, if at all, but apparently that's quite unusual. Usually when there's a dead body involved, it's something that happens pretty quickly. And I looked it up to see if I could find out more information about it. But most things I found were pretty subjective to the situation. Depends on a range of factors, jurisdiction, circumstances of the case, availability of evidence. But if there's clear evidence and probable cause, generally law enforcement can get a warrant quickly. And in this case, there were 2 dead bodies. That's probable cause that something went wrong here. So you would think that they would get that quickly. Sometimes in under an hour, it can happen. This took 10 hours. No information was provided as to why. That was one of the many question marks in this case. So while they're waiting on this warrant, the cops kind of put together a mobile command unit outside of the home and wasted no time finding the first witness to talk to, who was Melissa, the friend who had showed up at the house and then called the police. Melissa was visibly very upset when she found out that both women were dead, and her statement to the police only added to the heartbreak of this entire scene, because she told police that BB was pregnant. And this detail changed things actually somewhat significantly, because under Maricopa law in Maricopa County, Arizona, if someone is pregnant and you murder them, that baby, that unborn baby, is considered a murder also. So now this was a triple homicide, not just a double homicide. Melissa told police she didn't really know BB all that well. She was very close with Nicole. And all Melissa could really offer police about BB was the first name of the baby's father, Marquis. And she said she thinks he drove a maroon Chrysler that had, quote, fancy wheels. When it came to Nicole, Melissa was, able to tell them a lot. They were very close friends. She said that their last conversation was the night before over the phone. Nicole had said to Melissa that she was waiting on a ride for a private bartending gig at a private party. But she didn't tell Melissa where the gig was, who it was for, or who was picking her up. And they didn't speak again after that. Melissa said she missed a text message that Nicole sent around 11:15, venting that like no one had shown up to pick me up for this gig and no one had even called. So she basically texted her friend Melissa kind of bitching about like, I had this gig tonight. Remember I told you about the gig earlier and I'm waiting for this ride. I got all ready and nobody's showing up. So Melissa cooperated completely. She let the police search her car. She provided names of other people that they might want to talk to. And I believe she also provided her DNA. So she was essentially cleared of any involvement pretty quickly. And not long after talking to Melissa, kind of like right on cue, a man in a maroon car with what, I think most people might consider fancy wheels showed up on the scene and was confused and was like, why are there all these police at my girlfriend's house? This is Marquis, the father of BB's unborn child. Police immediately asked to interview him right there on the scene at their mobile command center. They asked him, what do you think is going on here? And why do you think there are so many police here at your girlfriend's house? And Marquis said, I don't know. Does it have something to do with last night? And I mean, obviously Marquis has no idea what's going on. Police are looking at him as a potential suspect right off the bat. And so when he says, does it have something to do with what happened last night? Police are like, well, what happened last night? So Marquis explained that he had been there at the house the night before with Nicole and BB, and Nicole had gotten a call about a private bartending gig. So Marquis told the police that Nicole talked BB into joining her with this to do this private bartending gig because the person who was hiring them was apparently arranging a fancy limo ride and promised that they would make about $400 before tips. BB said, fine, okay, I'll tag along. And that was kind of Marquis' signal to leave. He was like, okay, well, you girls have fun. I'm going to go. Right before he left, though, apparently BB got a little bit worked up and began asking him about an incident where he bumped into his ex-girlfriend. Marquis said it was, a minor disagreement, nothing serious, and, things were ultimately fine between them. So he left around 8 p.m. He went to a few nightclubs. BB called him at 10:30 p.m., but he missed the call. And a little bit after midnight, he tried to call her back, but she didn't answer. The phone went right to voicemail. And then he called her again 5 times at 2:07 a.m. And then he also texted her saying, I tried calling you, but you never responded. Call me back.
Bored at home? Head over to Chumba Casino and join some serious social casino fun. With hundreds of games at your fingertips, no purchase necessary. You can play anytime, anywhere. There's a special welcome bonus waiting for you when you sign up. Play for fun, play for free, and you could even redeem some great prizes. Visit ChumbaCasino.com and get ready to reel in the fun. Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply.
So now, that was the day before. So that was December 2nd. So now here we are, December 3rd. He didn't hear from her all day, and phone was still going right to voicemail. He was like a little confused and concerned. So he decided to drive over to the house, and that brings us to kind of right now. So police explained to him that both women had been killed, from what they could tell, that they only were able to go in and identify that both women were dead, and were not able, until they had a warrant, to kind of investigate much more. Which, now that I'm saying that, it actually seems strange to me because, well, it only seems strange to me, I guess, in the context of TV. If I'm thinking about like Law and Order and FBI and all the shows that I watch that I love, if there's a dead body, they just start investigating immediately and like putting together, clues and evidence. But maybe they just don't show on TV the waiting for the warrant part. So ignore me. Okay. So once police told him this, he was visibly upset. They asked him if he had any idea who might want to do this. He said it couldn't have had anything to do with BB because she was just too sweet, and that it must have had something to do with Nicole. And that BB was kind of just like a collateral damage. He also provided his DNA and cooperated fully. So although they were looking at him initially, right off the bat as like top suspect, they cleared him for now. And once he was cleared, he told them he's driving to Tucson to notify BB's mother in person, which I thought was a very kind thing to do. So after Marquis left, police started talking to the neighbors, who shared a few insights about Nicole and Melissa. They said that they did like to host parties that sometimes went pretty late, but it was nothing too wild, and that most of the neighbors hadn't observed anything particularly out of the ordinary, especially in the days leading up to these deaths. One neighbor did say that they saw contractors on the premises before, kind of lugging around equipment like cords and buckets. But Nicole's friend Melissa clarified with the police and said that's because BB was having her floors redone. So that was pretty normal. So while all of this was happening at Nicole and BB's house, Samantha, BB's sister, was also trying to get a hold of her. And she said, quote, "We're like, maybe her phone's dead. And then my cousin called me and he's like, I don't want to freak you out, but my dad saw something on the news." Samantha's cousin wasn't the only one who saw something on the news. So Nicole's mother, Rachel, was supposed to actually go over to Nicole's house that day, that December 3rd, to help her fix a printer or something like that at her house. But Rachel, Nicole's mom, had been working nights and she was just too tired to go. So she called Nicole around 11 a.m. after she had gotten her hair done that morning to let her know, like, I'm not going to come by today. But Nicole didn't answer. So she left a voicemail, said, I'm too tired. I'll be there this weekend, though. Around 5 p.m., Rachel received a call from her hairdresser who had done her hair that morning. And she said, quote, "Turn on the TV. I think Nicole and Melissa are dead inside their house." Rachel remembers this call and says, "So I turned on the TV and there's a picture of my daughter's house, her car, and Melissa's car. And they said 2 27-year-old women are dead inside the house." So Rachel is in shock and kind of not wanting to believe maybe there's a mistake. Maybe it's not them. In her gut, she knew. She could feel it in her gut that something was wrong. This was them. But she didn't want to fully believe it yet. So her and her husband got in their car and they lived about 45 minutes away. So they immediately drove right over to the house and arrived at what was, a scene with lots of police and police activity. So even though Rachel's instincts, what she was feeling in her gut kind of already told her, she still went up to police and asked, "What's going on? Can you tell me who they are? What are their names?" And at this point, law enforcement still doesn't have a warrant, and so they are not able to provide any information. So Rachel and her husband book a hotel nearby. At around 3 a.m., she received a devastating call from the police confirming that her daughter, Nicole, was dead. The news of these murders went public on December 4th, the next day. They held a small press conference explaining that both women had been found murdered in their home. They were both apparently strangled. One of the detectives said, "We don't know exactly when this triple homicide took place, but detectives suspect from the timeline that it happened between December 2nd and December 3rd around midnight." After this, police got on their investigation immediately, and the first step was to obtain phone records from both girls, using their recent calls and texts and things like that as kind of a starting place, and reaching out to these friends to talk to them. And as soon as they started reaching out to the girls' friends, they began to realize that both girls had extensive social circles. It seemed like each person that the cops interviewed turned them on to, 5 more people that they should talk to. And so it was just like, talk to one person, and then they had to talk to 5 more. And then one of those people would say, "Oh, you got to talk to these people." And that was not surprising. The girls were both very social. They had lots of friends. They worked in the service industry in strip clubs as bartenders. So they had a big social circle, which obviously made a more difficult job for police. Police said that everyone they interviewed emphasized that both girls were so outgoing. They were so warm and generous. They often welcomed people into their home who were having financial struggles, like people from where they worked. If somebody was having a hard time or not getting along with their spouse, that the girls would say, "Come stay with us. You can stay with us." So very generous. But unfortunately, all these people that they spoke to, none of them were able to provide really any kind of useful information. I mean, it painted a picture of the girls and their life and their lifestyle, but nothing indicated why or who would want to murder them. But police then received a call from a man named Jose. And Jose said that he was good friends with Nicole and BB, and he hung out with them regularly. And he said, "I actually was with them the day before they were murdered. I went over and I was hanging out with Nicole and BB, and there was also a contractor in the house working on the floors. His name was Johnny." According to Jose, that day on December 2nd, when he was there, Nicole was kind of bustling about cleaning, organizing some things, and BB was laying on the couch, resting, possibly dealing with morning sickness, he said. Jose said that everything seemed really normal. And shortly after he arrived, Nicole said, "Can you please take out the trash?" Apparently that was normal. She often asked him to take out the trash because he was there a lot. So that didn't seem out of the ordinary, except for the fact that he started to take it out, and she said, "No, you can't use the back gate," which is kind of how he would usually go, through the backyard, out the back gate, into the alley. That's where the trash bins were. And she said, "Yeah, you can't use the back gate. We can't get it open. We lost the key. We don't know where the key is to the back gate. So you got to go out front and kind of like walk around the whole block." He's like, "I'm not walking around the whole block to take out your trash." Nicole said, "Okay, well, could you at least do something helpful? And could you take the lock off of the back gate so that we could use it?" He said, "All right, I'll do it a little bit later." So then 2 more contractors show up, and he and BB and Nicole are still just kind of hanging out. And then Nicole says, "Me and BB have to go to a doctor's appointment. Do you want to come with?" Jose said, "Nah, I'll hang here and I'll wait for you guys to come back and I'll fix that lock. I'll take the lock off so you can use the gate." So they left, and he got to work removing the lock, which sounds like a pretty easy thing to do, but apparently turned out to be a lot trickier than he initially thought. It took him like over an hour, and he had to like end up breaking it off with a hammer. He couldn't get the screws out. So once he finally got the lock off, he put it on the kitchen counter so that Nicole would be sure to see it when she got home. He hung out a little while, kind of waiting for them. He gave them a call. They didn't answer. He's like, "Oh, this is taking too long, so I'm going to go." He went to another friend's house. And he never saw the girls again. So that was really all the information he could provide. He did happen to get a business card from Johnny, the contractor, so he gave that to police. And he also provided his DNA and cooperated fully. So Jose was now ruled out as a suspect. The next day, police decided to contact Johnny, the contractor, and bring him in for an interview. Johnny explained to police that several months back, Nicole had found him online, called him, he gave her an estimate, and she hired him. He actually was unable to kind of fit her in, though. So even though she called him, I think in October, he didn't start working until December 1st. So just a few days prior to the murders. He said that him and his employees, his other contractors, were there all day. They came back the next day, December 2nd at 8 a.m. Police asked if he noticed anything while he was there. He said, I did notice that Nicole came and went a lot, and she had several different visitors just in those 2 days. But the strangest thing, he said, was that she always said whenever she left the house, she said she was going to Walmart, but she never came home with any bags from Walmart or any purchases from Walmart. Unfortunately, police didn't know what to make of this, and because Johnny didn't really have any names, there were no cameras, they couldn't go anywhere with this. Like, visitors means nothing, you know? So Johnny wrapped up his interview by explaining to police that him and his contractors were supposed to come back the morning of the 3rd to finish the job, but they had another job that took precedence that they had to get done first thing in the morning. So he called Nicole. He left word saying, we're going to be a little bit later today, but he never heard back from her. And when they showed up later in that day, the house was a crime scene. When detectives asked him about, that he had noticed all these visitors coming and going, Johnny mentioned that he was surprised with how trusting the women were. He said that the doors seemed to always be unlocked even when they went out. Like when both of them went out and Johnny and the contractors were still there, like they never locked it. They were fine having Johnny and his crew kind of on the premises. So the detectives went on to interview Johnny's workers, his crew. It was actually his siblings, so it was like a family business. They all basically said the same exact thing as Johnny, and every single one of them provided DNA. So Johnny ended up being a dead end. Police continued to explore other potential witnesses, suspects, friends, but they really weren't having much luck. There was nothing, everyone cooperated. Everyone provided DNA. Some people even took polygraph tests. So it was just, there was no one that seemed questionable or like a suspect. It was during this period that the medical examiner, police, days have gone by now, police are interviewing people. The medical examiner finally reached a conclusion that both Nicole and BB had been strangled and their deaths were officially ruled as homicides. The ME also confirmed BB's pregnancy and said that both women had defensive wounds, which indicated that they struggled before they were killed. And this was a really strange statement that one of the detectives said. He said that even though there's no concrete evidence of sexual assault, it didn't mean that it didn't happen, but he refused to elaborate on that. I don't really know what that means. So police eventually got that warrant, like I said, 10 hours later, and these are some of the things that they noticed and evidence that they found within the house. There was no sign of forced entry and nothing that indicated a violent struggle or fight before they were killed. Everything was kind of in its place. They were both, as they were found in different parts of the house, that it was determined they were also killed in those places in separate rooms in the house. And the weirdest thing is that they said that the killer or killers locked the door when they were leaving. So remember how Melissa, the friend, her key didn't work in the front. And that's because the killer had locked the lock on the doorknob, which apparently there was no way to open that from the outside. So like when I leave, I probably shouldn't say this. I'm going to say it anyway. When I leave my house, like my front door, the lock is on the doorknob. It's that like little turny thing. So I don't need to even use a key when I leave. I just turn that before I shut the door and then my door's locked. So I'm guessing it was kind of like that, but you couldn't open it from the outside. But like what killer locks the door before you leave? And it wasn't clear if it was that lower lock that you couldn't get to from outside, or if it was like, did the killer have a key? I mean, it was just who murders two women and then locks the door? Very strange. The other thing that was really confusing is that, so the girls were strangled, police said, with some type of cord, but strangling somebody, it's not like a gunshot. It's not like you shoot them and then if somebody else is home, you can turn and shoot them too. Like, it takes time. It can often take around 4 minutes from start to finish to actually strangle someone to death. So if there was only one murderer, how did he murder whoever was murdered first, BB, I believe, without Nicole hearing? I mean, he would have had to do it real fast, and then if Nicole came in, then murder her and then drag her to the other room. It didn't make sense. So this caused authorities to think, well, maybe there were two murderers. So Nicole and BB were murdered at essentially the same time. Police said that they recovered a bunch of evidence with DNA on its cell phones, clothing. They did a sexual assault kit, fingerprints. But for some reason, similarly to the warrant to get into the house, it took months and months to process all of this DNA. CBS 5 News actually looked into this backlog. There was a backlog as far back as 2008, apparently, in Phoenix. Basically, people just blamed that there wasn't enough manpower. There wasn't enough manpower. That was it. The DNA eventually did get processed, but there was no positive match. No one, the fingerprints, the DNA, obviously Nicole and BB's was there, and there was a multitude of other people. We know that they had parties. We know that they had lots of friends, but apparently none of those people were in the system. Something that struck me as very sad was that, once the police were done taking evidence from the house, the family members had to clean out the house and get each of the women's things and like that. And that's when they discovered a Ziploc bag containing BB's pregnancy test. And it had the words "Merry Christmas" written on the pregnancy test. She was apparently going to give it to her mom as a Christmas gift, which is just incredibly sad. So at this point, police are kind of baffled. They really haven't gotten anywhere. And then on December 14th, a woman called the police and said that they should interview BB's ex-boyfriend. She claimed that he previously stalked her and threatened to kill her. And the woman speculated that if maybe he found out she was pregnant, and it obviously was not his, that he could have kind of snapped and done something terrible. It took a while for police to locate this ex-boyfriend. His name has never been disclosed, so we'll call him, I almost just said Mark. I don't know why. We will call him Steve. So police finally located Steve towards the end of December, set up an interview with him for early January. Apparently that was the earliest he could come in. He told police that he was actually engaged to BB. Sorry, I just got a text message. He told police that he was actually engaged to BB for a while and that him and BB lived with Nicole for a little while, all the three of them. He said that he was pretty uncomfortable with how many men Nicole always seemed to have hanging around the house and kind of coming and going at all times of day or night. He also completely denied threatening BB, and he said he absolutely did not murder them. And when the police asked him, well, who do you think could have done this? He said the same thing that Marquis, the father of, or would-be father of BB's baby, said, that it must have had something to do with Nicole, and BB was just a tragic casualty because she was just adored by everyone. She wasn't involved in anything weird. He gave the detectives a list of a few other people that they could speak with, and over the next, following weeks, detectives interviewed everyone that had been suggested to them, not only by, Steve, but by all of the Nicole and BB's friends. And it was a long list. It seemed that every time that like I said before, every time that they spoke to somebody, they were suggested somebody else they should speak to. With everyone they spoke to, they did collect DNA. So as more names were brought to their attention, more interviews were conducted, more DNA was collected. It seemed that the women kind of had an endless array of friends. Most of them were through their work in the service industry. So despite all of the people they interviewed, all of the DNA they collected, nothing kind of yielded a clear suspect or a motive. The police were pretty confident at this point that robbery wasn't the motive. They thought it was something more personal because they didn't notice anything taken from the house. The house wasn't disturbed. There was no forced entry. But that was really all that they could determine at this point, is that it wasn't due to a robbery. They had no suspects, no solid leads, and this caused the case to go cold pretty quickly. 4 years later, in 2016, Nicole's family was so frustrated that there had been no progress. Nothing had been determined, no arrests, nothing. The case was just kind of shelved. They hired a private investigator in the hopes of uncovering some type of new lead. The private investigator did uncover some additional information and also received an interesting tip. Both of these things made the private investigator wonder if maybe Nicole had been the target. It turned out that a few months before her murder, Nicole had been involved in a wiretapping investigation that resulted in dozens of arrests and various levels of felony charges involving drugs, street gangs, weapons, and money laundering. Apparently, police had recorded a phone call between Nicole and she was calling a friend to try and buy some pot, and that's how she ended up being involved in this. The details there was not a lot of details on this, so I don't know if I'm imagining they were looking at other people and Nicole just happened to call one of those people and then she was at that point involved. She was in the process of appealing this conviction, and the charges against her involving street gangs, money laundering, and marijuana were dropped. She pled guilty to using electronic communication in a drug transaction, and she received probation. So the tip that the PI got, no idea where from, suggested that while she was on probation, Nicole became a confidential informant for the police. And this kind of made sense because a lot of her charges were just dropped, and this could be why. If she had become a CI for the police, in exchange they would lessen her charges. And also made sense that maybe she was then targeted. If she had turned state's evidence against some of the dozens of co-defendants, the other people that were involved in this and were receiving felony charges, if she had given up names, perhaps they came back. That came back to her, and they came to kill her for snitching, and BB just happened to be in the house. Wrong place, wrong time. For the longest time, police would neither confirm or deny this. I knew what a confidential informant was. I see it on all my Law and Order shows and everything that I watch. But so I knew what it was, but I just wanted to kind of see if there was anything more pertinent, like more about that I could share. And for those people who don't know what it is, it's, essentially someone who provides inside information to police on a variety of things, on cases they're working on people who are selling drugs. It can really be anything. They're just providing information that would be difficult for the police to get on their own. I didn't realize that some confidential informants get paid. Some do it to get a better deal if they have their own legal troubles. Some do it for revenge. And then I found something that said some do it out of the goodness of their own heart, which maybe. And there are, for the longest time, there were no real rules or guidelines to the role that police play in protecting or making sure that their informants are okay, or how liable the police are for the informant's well-being, until in Florida in 2008, a 23-year-old Rachel Hoffman was fatally shot during a sting operation while she was acting as an informant. The story attracted national attention and helped create something called Rachel's Law, which now is a body of guidelines regulating how Florida police use confidential informants. But that's, again, just in Florida. So most other places don't have something like this, which is scary for the informants. So the police wouldn't confirm or deny if Nicole was a confidential informant. And at a certain point, Nicole's mom, Rachel, was just so frustrated and so pissed off that she decided to take legal action. She sued the city of Phoenix in 2016 for wrongful death. She accused the police of negligence and failing to protect Nicole from possible violence for being a confidential informant. So Nicole's mom is just assuming that, yes, this is true. She was a confidential informant. By 2017, the city and Rachel agreed to, they settled. She dropped the suit. She told the New Times, which was a publication, that during the discovery phase of this lawsuit, city representatives stated under oath that her daughter had not been a confidential informant. And so she kind of had to drop the case. Which to me, I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm not a religious person, or I'm not sure, but like stating something under oath, I feel like people lie or potentially lie all the time. I don't know. So also around this time, it was a little bit before the lawsuit, but right around then, the families held a kind of a memorial, not a memorial, I think they just called it a prayer circle. And I believe they did this every year on December 3rd to kind of honor BB and Nicole. They would stand in a circle, light candles, say prayers. Nicole's mother, Rachel, said, "I'm just hoping for closure, for some resolution from this nightmare. I can accept that she's gone. What I can't accept is this person that committed this horrible crime remains free." And one of the detectives on the case said, for a parent, the worst thing in the world that can happen is to bury a child. And we haven't been able to give this family really closure. As time goes on, tips can make or break a case. So we want to ask anyone and everyone, if they know something, it's really important to come forward with information, and you can remain anonymous. Nicole's mom, Rachel, said that because the girls were murdered during the Christmas season, the holidays have lost all joy. She says, quote, "I used to love Christmas. It was my favorite time of year. I don't even decorate anymore. I'm dead in that compartment. I can't find any joy in the holiday, maybe when I have some closure." And 14 years later, so this year, there are still no suspects, no motive, and no movement in this high-profile homicide that has left police totally stumped for well over a decade. Detective Sergeant Steve, I'm not going to pronounce that last name. We'll call him Detective Sergeant Steve with the Phoenix Police Department, said this is a case that has haunted investigators and family alike. Sergeant Brian Bauer, also a spokesperson for the Phoenix Police Department, said the killings are considered a cold case, but that these cases can be reopened just as quickly if new information comes in from the public. Apparently the physical evidence in the case hasn't, nothing else has come up since 2010. There's nothing more they can do. And one of the head detectives on the case described it at this point as being, it's forensically tapped. There's nothing else. The police do try to stay in regular communication with both of the families, and the families will occasionally reach out to check if there's been any progress or anything new, but there just hasn't been. So one other detective said they've followed up on everything they can, and now we're either waiting for some kind of break in technology with forensics or for someone to come forward and provide information that breaks the case open, which confused me a little bit because 2010, yes, obviously forensic technology has advanced since then. But at the end of the day, if somebody's DNA or fingerprints aren't in the system, I don't know. You know what? This just hit me right now. I do remember, I think it was Sherry Black, the bookstore owner. I hope I'm not confusing those. That feels wrong if I am. But that case was more recent, and they ended up catching the guy because they found one of his family members' DNA and was able to do it through one of those genealogy, like 23andMe type things, I think. So maybe that's what he's referring to. BB's sister, Samantha, had said that, investigators always go to the boyfriends, husbands first, especially since my sister was pregnant. So they heavily interviewed, gave a lie detector test, all of that to her boyfriend to see if he had any involvement. But I believe that my sister was collateral damage, wrong place, wrong time. She gave a shout out to Nicole's mom, Rachel, for her efforts in keeping the public informed about the murders. However, she expressed concern about how much time has passed and how many different detectives have been involved in the case over the years. Detectives retire, move on. She described it kind of as a game of telephone because details can get mixed up or forgotten as they get passed along. And that I can't imagine. That must be just so frustrating. She said, quote, "We're going into year 14 with no answers. We're at square one. I literally feel like the people in the police department have just put their hands up. Like they can't do anything else." So anyone with information about these murders of Nicole Glass and Melissa BB Mason is asked to call the Phoenix Police Department at 602-262-6151, and you can submit anonymous tips. I know that Jane Butkus is probably very frustrated right now because she had recently sent me a message or left something on Patreon saying that she does not care for these unresolved cases. And I can understand that. I tend to agree a little bit. I think that I like doing them here and there because you never know. You never know who's listening. You never know who might hear this, whose podcast feed this might pop up on, and they might, know something, have heard something. You never know. I obviously don't think that that's super likely, but I do kind of feel like for some of these unsolved cases, it can't hurt to get the word out more as much as possible. But yeah, that is the end of Nicole Glass and Melissa BB Mason. A really, really sad one. They're all sad. I actually, when I was, and David, I think he suggested last week's, and I believe he also suggested this week's. I'm going to look right now. No, maybe he didn't. I don't know where I found this one then, to be honest. If somebody did suggest this and I am completely blanking on that, then I apologize and send me a message and let me know. And I will absolutely give you credit, because the case suggestions are really, really helpful. Like I think I talked about last week, sometimes finding a case to do is one of the hardest parts, because I'll get into one and be like, oh, this is such an interesting one, and then realize there's just not enough information, or it's too confusing of a story, and so on and so forth. So anyways, thoughts and love go out to both of those families. So sad, so tragic. And I apologize for this being a day late. I did explain on the video, which will just be on Patreon, that when I was recording yesterday, I got a text message. I got some bad news about a very close friend who's been in the hospital for the better part of this past year, and I could not continue. So I apologize for that. I know that the inconsistency that has been happening with this podcast is shameful and probably very annoying. I think I already did this bit in the beginning, though, apologizing and then saying I'm not going to apologize anymore. So I will leave it at that. Thank you for listening. Hopefully, Jenna and I can cross paths long enough this week to be able to do this together. Mark really loved doing these when Jenna was unavailable. But I don't know. I would love opinions on that. I think that I shared so much personal stuff and we had such a hard time, and now things are, seemingly quite good. That I don't, something is making me stop. Something is giving me pause from having him join me as a, occasional co-host when Jenna's not available. And I don't know if that's correct or not. Maybe nobody cares, or maybe you don't mind it when I just do it by myself. I'm not really sure. So I'd love to get opinions and feedback on that. I still haven't checked an Instagram message. What is that, from 2 weeks ago that I said I'm going to? I have not. But you could I am checking the email. You could email us, deathxsouthwest@gmail.com. And that's it. I will leave it at that. Say thank you for listening. Love all of you guys. Please try out our Patreon where this video will be. Send us an email. Leave us an Apple review, and just thank you to all of you for sticking with the show. Okay. Bye, guys.
Death by Southwest is hosted by Jenna Schneider and Margot Carmichael.
Executive produced by Margot Carmichael.
Produced by Jenna Schneider.
Audio editing and sound design by Margot Carmichael.
Music by Soundstripe.
And a special thanks to Edward R. Murrow for letting us borrow his famous sign-off phrase, "Good night and good luck."